On the morning of September 4th, 2024, breaking news reports swept across the state about an incident taking place in Barrow County. It would be hours until information was confirmed, but parents receiving texts from their children made one thing obvious. Apalachee High had just joined the tragic and ever-growing club of schools experiencing mass shootings. Helicopters circling the campus and people being brought out on stretchers only proved to the state and soon the nation just how serious the situation actually was. It would quickly be revealed that the shooter was in custody, a 14-year-old student named Colt Gray. Since then, more information has been released daily about what led to this horrific tragedy, which is now being referred to as one of the worst mass shootings in Georgia history. In this video, we'll be covering everything you need to know about what took place and what to expect going forward. To understand all of this and more, we need to go behind the headlines. So before we get into the details of this case, it's important to note that new information is still being released hour by hour in some instances. There is some that is yet to be confirmed by the GBI and may just be rumor and conjecture. I'll be mainly focused on the facts of the case first before talking about what the community and even members of the shooter's family have said online. Located in the city of Winder and Barrow County, Apalachee High School has just under 2,000 students. On Monday, September 2nd, the school posted a schedule on their Facebook page writing, "A short but good week ahead." The students would be out for Labor Day and had a football game to look forward to on Friday. However, the events that took place on September 4th would erase any and all hope of it being a good week and would actually change the lives of all the students and staff of Apalachee forever. School had been back in session for nearly a month, and that Wednesday started off just like any other day. Some upperclassmen drove to school, while other students were dropped off or took the bus. They all shuttled in to make it to first period by 8:15 a.m. One new face in the crowd was a freshman named Colt Gray, who had just enrolled in Apalachee on August 14th. Since then, he'd already missed 9 days of school, so most of the students didn't know much about him. Colt, dressed in all black and wearing a hoodie, arrived at school on the bus. He sat through first period, which ended at 9:38 a.m. The students have 7 minutes to get to their next class, which begins at 9:45. Colt sat down in his Algebra 1 class next to a student named Layla Ciarith, who described him as a quiet kid that never really spoke to anyone. Layla said that during group work, Colt would only respond to his peers with one-worded answers, so no one knew him well enough to anticipate what he was planning that day, at least none of the students. Before class began, Colt asked their teacher if he could go to the office to speak with someone and was given permission. He gathered up his things, including his backpack, but instead of going to the office, Colt made his way to a nearby bathroom. At some point that morning, Colt texted his parents Marcy and Colin Gray saying things like, "I'm sorry," and "You're not to blame for this." His mother Marcy, who was staying with her parents about 200 miles away in Fitzgerald, Georgia, stated that her intuition told her that something was seriously wrong. She said that she called the school at around 9:50 and spoke to a guidance counselor. The counselor told her that she had received an email from a teacher letting her know that Colt had been making references to school shootings that morning. The call lasted until 10 a.m., and Marcy said she urged the school to go locate Colt, who was potentially having an extreme emergency. An administrator arrived at Colt's Algebra 1 class, but there was some confusion. In that same room was another student by the name of Colton Gray, and the administrator mistakenly took him out of class, not knowing that Colt Gray was hiding out in the bathroom. After talking to Colton, the admin realized she had the wrong boy, and he returned to class at about 10:20 a.m. Around that same time, someone came over the intercom, letting the teacher know they were actually looking for Colt, not Colton. Simultaneously, Colt emerged from the bathroom and could be seen standing outside the classroom door. The teacher replied to the intercom, "Oh, he's here," and told another student named Bree Jones to let him in. At Apalachee and most schools, classroom doors automatically lock when they're closed. Bree approached the door and looked out the small window. That's when she saw Colt pulling a large gun, later confirmed to be an AR-15 style rifle, from his backpack. This gun was larger than the bag, but Colt had reportedly wrapped something around it, concealing it as some sort of school project. Bree backed away from the door, which is when Colt turned and began shooting.
He knocked on the door. I saw him holding a bag and just pulling the gun out. I'm not sure what kind of bag was it, but I seen him pulling it out of a bag, and like the gun was so big. Like I always look out the door before I open it. It's just like it's a habit my mom taught me.
As class had already started, the only people in the hall were students going somewhere with passes, like to the office or the bathroom. In a recent interview, Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith said that 2 teachers left their classrooms to investigate the sounds. He said that surveillance footage indicates that the teachers were going to try to fight Colt and get him to stop, but it didn't work out that way, and they were subsequently shot as well. Students in the class of math teacher Richard Aspinwall say that he looked into the hall to see what was going on, which is when he was struck by gunfire. More than a dozen shots rang out through the school, and everyone scrambled for cover. When Colt moved on from Aspinwall's class, the students had to pull him in so that they could close the door.
Colt shot my teacher multiple times. Had to drag our teacher's body and fully into the classroom. We heard him take his last breath.
Richard Aspinwall died moments later, as well as another math teacher named Christina Iremi and two 14-year-old boys named Christian Angulo and Mason Schermerhorn. In less than a minute, 4 people were killed, 7 others shot, and 2 more injured. Only a week prior to the incident, Apalachee had implemented a new security system with the Atlanta-based company called Synergix. This system essentially puts panic buttons on wearable lanyards that all members of school staff wear in case of an emergency. They coincide with lights throughout the school and classrooms and in the halls. It also can immediately alert emergency services during a fire or active shooter situation, showing administration, police, and first responders the exact location in the school where the panic button was pressed. In the case of an active shooter, lights come on indicating the staff to go on either a soft or hard lockdown, without admin having to make an audible announcement that could potentially alert the intruder. After the shots were heard, several teachers utilized their panic buttons, alerting the Barrow County Sheriff's Office of the emergency. The lights in the classroom indicated to all of the teachers throughout the building to go on lockdown, and students began frantically calling and texting their parents, friends, and loved ones to let them know what was going on. The students and teachers hid under desks, huddled in corners, pushed things in front of their doors, doing everything they could to stay alive. Thankfully, the school didn't have to wait for the sheriff's office to get there, because 2 heroic resource officers named Chase Boyd and Brandon King were already in the building. It was only around 52 seconds between the first shot being fired to the last when officers Boyd and King came around the corner and confronted Colt. Armed with handguns, Boyd and King could be heard ordering Colt to put down the gun and lay on the ground. He reportedly surrendered without resistance, and they put him in handcuffs, cutting the terrifying ordeal shorter than Colt had expected. This was indicated when more magazines, ammunition, and a knife were located in his backpack, and he was immediately taken into custody. Within minutes, a massive law enforcement presence could be seen outside of the school.
The police, please, the Apalachee High School, my daughter calling me crying. Somebody, for everybody, boom, 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 boom.
We have officers out there, okay?
We do have an active situation at Apalachee High School right now. We have a lot of calls coming in. We do have units on scene.
I got 2 videos inside the school. One of them's him and some officers with the person laying on the floor next to the gun.
Barrow County 911, what is the address of your emergency?
I'm headed to the school. My husband's a teacher.
You have reached Barrow County 911. If this is an emergency, please do not hang up. We are experiencing a high call volume.
Not even 10 minutes after the shooting, officers began pulling those who were injured outside to begin medical services. Sheriff Smith said that the fast response likely saved at least 4 of the victims' lives who had been shot. All nearby schools were placed in lockdown as well, as heavily armed officers swept the building. They quickly searched for anyone else who had been injured and other potential shooters. Outside, hundreds of parents rushed to the school, searching for answers and praying that their children were okay. The media also arrived on scene, with reporters covering the developing situation.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air with breaking news about a deadly school shooting in Winder, Georgia. That's about an hour northeast of Atlanta. The early reports were that around 10:20 this morning, law enforcement were summoned to the school on word of an active shooting.
Helicopters were circling in the air, including medical choppers that airlifted at least 2 wounded victims to Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. After the school was cleared of any other threats, officers evacuated each classroom and ushered the students to the football field. Footage at the scene showed students huddled together, crying, some doubled over vomiting. Others appeared to be in shock. By around 1 p.m., students were able to begin reuniting with their families, and parents could be seen racing toward their children and hugging them in the stadium. Buses were dispatched to take children home whose parents couldn't make it to the school immediately. Within an hour of the shooting, investigators were already searching Colt Gray's home on Harrison Mill Road. around 6 miles away from Apalachee High School. That's where he lived with his father, 54-year-old Colt Gray, who would soon be arrested and charged in connection with the shooting. Throughout the day and into the night, the Barrow County Sheriff's Office and the GBI did several press conferences to update the community and the nation with updates about what had taken place.
There are 4 individuals who are deceased from this incident, 9 that have been taken to local hospitals with various injuries. Of those that are deceased, 2 are students and 2 are teachers here at the school. The priority right now for us within this investigation is to gather all the facts, to make sure that we're accurate with it, because this is a murder investigation. As the sheriff mentioned earlier this morning, the shooter is in custody. His name is Colt, that's Colt Gray. He is a 14-year-old student here at the school, Gray. He is a 14-year-old student here at the high school. Again, he has been taken into custody. He will be charged with murder and he will be tried as an adult.
I never imagined that I would be speaking to the media in my career over something that happened today, the pure evil that happened today. I cannot thank the people behind me for the support they give me today, to give this office and give this staff. This hits home for me. I was born and raised here. I went to school in this school system. My kids go to this school system. I'm proud of this school system. My heart hurts for these kids. My heart hurts for our community. But I want to make it very clear that hate will not prevail in this county. I want that to be very clear and known. Love will prevail over what happened today.
Governor Brian Kemp joined as well to offer his support in the developing situation. On Friday, September 6th, the Barrow County Courthouse was packed with loved ones of the shooting victims. Colt made his first court appearance and was told that he's being charged as an adult on 4 counts of felony murder. The judge named Curry Mingledorf stated that due to his age, the state won't be able to seek the death penalty. However, if convicted, he is facing life in prison, and the DA stated that more charges are to be expected within the upcoming weeks. Colt's voice was briefly heard as he told the judge that he understood the charges.
Do you understand that you have the right to be represented by an attorney in these proceedings?
Yes, sir.
And you are in fact represented today, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Zane Harmon, you're here on behalf of this defendant, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and you understand that you have the right to be continuously represented throughout this proceeding, and if you cannot afford to hire counsel, then this court is obligated under the Constitution to provide counsel for you.
Less than an hour later, Colt's father, Colt Gray, made his first appearance in front of the same judge. As Colin rocked back and forth, he learned that he's being charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. These are the stiffest charges ever brought against the parent of a juvenile who carried out a deadly attack. He faces a maximum sentence of 180 years in prison if convicted. Investigators say that Colin knowingly allowed his son Colt to have access to the weapon involved in the shooting, which we will look further into a bit later. But now I think is a good time to start going over everything we currently know about his family, so we can hopefully begin to understand how and why this tragedy took place. Colt Gray is the son of Colin and Marcy Gray, and to say their family is dysfunctional would be a gross understatement. Based on posts made by Marcy herself, it appears as though she and Colin got together shortly before Colt was born in 2010. They went on to have a daughter, now 13, and another son, now 8. Things started out promising for the family, with Colin and Marcy purchasing a small farm in Barrow County in 2011. They planned to create a non-profit therapeutic horse riding school for local underprivileged children. However, plans changed when Colin had to undergo 3 major back surgeries, and they ended up selling the farm in 2019. In a post made in November of 2022, Marcy indicated that the duration of her and Colin's relationship had actually been quite tumultuous. She wrote, "I know it's hard to understand from the outside looking in. Everyone in mine and his family couldn't understand why I stayed as long as I did. Ultimately, it was my own decision. I made a commitment to the Lord and my husband. No one but me understands the pain that my husband lives with every single day. Every single person in his life has hurt or betrayed him. And I truly believe that the Lord sent me to him because no one else was strong enough to stay by his side through thick and thin. I'm not about to give up on him now. We are just taking a break." According to her LinkedIn account, Marcy has a Bachelor of Science and Technology in Industrial Management from Georgia Southern and a Master of Science degree in Occupational Safety and Health from Columbia Southern University. She listed her last position as Senior Quality Engineer for PCC Airfoils, but according to family members, all of this success ended in 2021 due to Marcy having substance abuse issues. Prior to that, she had other legal troubles spanning back to 2007, ranging from domestic violence, drug possession, property damage, traffic violations, DUI, and civil fraud allegations. In 2020, a previous landlord of Marcy and Colin described them as chaotic. He said that they were evicted after falling too far behind on rent and chose to abandon their 2 German Shepherds on the property. He claimed they ignored his several attempts to reunite them with the dogs and said, "I imagine the next place they were renting didn't allow dogs, so they just left them." Even though they couldn't be bothered with the dogs, Colin did return at a later date to kick in the door and retrieve guns he had left behind. A woman named Lauren Vickers, who lived next door to Colin and Marcy in 2022, stated that the children were being neglected. At their home in Jefferson, Lauren said, quote, "There were nights where the mom would lock the children out of the house. They would be banging on the back door, just screaming, 'Mom, Mom, Mom,' and crying. It was absolutely devastating." She also said that sometimes the youngest son would come to her house asking for food, and they were never in clean clothes. These abuse allegations don't end with Marcy though, with her father Charles Polhamus saying that the children lived in a hostile environment. He said that Colin, quote, "beat up on Colt. I mean, not talking about physical, but screaming and hollering, and he did the same thing to my daughter." During all of this chaos, records indicate that Colt transferred schools several times in a relatively short time frame. He attended Hall County schools for 3 months between August and November of 2019, and then attended West Jackson Middle School in Jackson County from February 2022 to August 2022. The Grays were soon evicted from their Jefferson home, again for failing to pay their rent. As part of the eviction, deputies collected 3 firearms, including an AR-15 and a hunting bow, and kept them for safekeeping. The weapons were later returned to Colin, but this last hardship seemed to be the final straw in his and Marcy's marriage. Reports indicate that while Colin had been working in construction, Marcy's ever-growing drug problem led to them not having enough money to pay the rent, leading to the eviction. The two separated, and Marcy made a post that said, "After 14 years of almost constant domestic abuse, I packed myself and my babies up and relocated to my hometown in South Georgia. We are all good, and my kids are thriving." What she didn't mention was that even though she moved to Fitzgerald with the 2 youngest children, Colt actually stayed behind with his dad, and they moved together to Jackson County. She also didn't mention that in November of last year, she was arrested on felony drug possession charges after police found her with methamphetamine, fentanyl, a glass pipe for narcotics, and cyclobenzaprine tablets in her vehicle, along with an incorrect license plate. She lost custody of the 2 youngest children, and DCFS created a safety plan stating that Marcy could not see the children without supervision. Even though this plan was put in place, Marcy apparently didn't like that Colin wasn't letting her see the kids and decided to key his truck. She was arrested again and pleaded guilty to criminal damage of property, criminal trespass, family violence, and use of a license plate to conceal identity. She spent 1 month in jail and had to serve 5 months probation. She was also barred from contacting Colin except through a third party to negotiate their divorce and custody agreement. A Facebook post made by Marcy's sister, Annie Polhamus Brown, provides some further insight into the family dynamics. She wrote, "Mama and Daddy bailed Marcy out of jail. She went to rehab for a month or 2, and her husband went and picked her up without Mom's permission. She went up there and stayed with him and the kids for a few weeks. Issues started to arise, and now she is back in Fitzgerald at my parents' house. She destroyed my personal belongings. She stole thousands of dollars worth of property from my parents and pawned all of it. My mother let me take the phone my sister was using when she tied my mom up and left her for dead. I took pictures of her Google searches, her texts between people that she was working with, pictures of handwritten notes she was exchanging with her drug friends and their parents. She poured 2 gallons of white paint all over my childhood memories, a chest full of my awards, crafts, pictures with friends, and yes, I've got pictures of that too. And best of all, I took a video of the video she recorded burning all of my soccer jerseys in our fireplace, including the one I wore during my first year at Darton, my national championship jersey. Darton was absorbed by Albany State University and my coach died 2 years ago. That jersey was literally irreplaceable. My sister stole many, many things and pawned them. My mom's gold, my dad's power tools, and I have handwritten messages between her and her supplier discussing her pawn shop visit, prices for drugs, etc. During all of this, after the eviction, Colt transferred schools again in 7th grade, which is when more problems started to arise outside of the home situation. Colin later said that Colt was constantly picked on, touched, pinched, taunted, and called gay by bullies at his old school, but things were getting better now that he had switched. He reported this to 2 officers who showed up at their new home in Jackson County, investigating alleged threats made on a Discord server. In May of 2023, the FBI's National Threat Operations Center alerted the local law enforcement after receiving anonymous tips about a user going by the name Lanza in Russian, discussing ideas of shooting up a school. That name probably refers to Adam Lanza, who carried out the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary back in 2012. The user wrote, "I'm committing a mass shooting and I'm waiting a good 2 to 3 years." They posted a photo of a family holding signs in support of their trans daughter and said, "I need to put an end to that. I'm on the edge of an LGBTQ massacre." Investigators traced an email address associated with a Discord back to Colt Gray, as well as the IP address to their old home. When police arrived to talk to Colin, he explained the recent turmoil the family had been dealing with, as well as bullying Colt had gone through at school.
She took my younger 2 and went back home, lived with her mama. Colt and I rented a house and came here. So we've been good, like no problems. He struggled at first with the separation. All school was kind of so. So I've been up to school countless times just tracking with him, you know, like, hey, make sure you're good. They understand what's going on.
He goes to Jefferson School?
He goes to Jefferson Middle School, yes, sir.
He discussed being heavily involved at the new school to make sure Colt was okay and made it through 7th grade without incident. However, he also disturbingly revealed that Colt did have access to weapons in the home, as Colin is an avid hunter. He spoke about taking Colt on his first hunting trip where he shot a deer for the first time, describing it as the best day ever.
Do you have weapons in the house?
I do.
Are they accessible to him?
They are. I mean, there's nothing loaded, but they are down. We do a lot of shooting. We do a lot of deer hunting. He shot his first deer this year.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, so like I'm pretty much in shock, to be honest with you.
Well,
I'm a little pissed off, to be even really honest with you, if that is what was said. But
well,
we've been up to the school for so many times now.
The information I got was sort of incomplete, and I don't know how old it is.
A video recently recovered showed this apparent hunting trip.
First ever deer hunt for me and Colt. He's hunting with a 450 Bushmaster.
Yes, sir.
107 yards. And let's go take a look. I'll follow you, sir. I see white.
During questioning, Colt told the officers that he wasn't familiar with the email address, and he also deleted his Discord account months earlier because people had hacked into his account.
Hey Colt, what's going on, bud? So did your dad kind of explain everything to you?
Said something about shooting up a school.
Did you say something about school shooting?
Never. I just told him, I don't know what. Maybe they misheard somebody else. I would never say I would threaten up to shoot.
You never ever said.
No, I swear.
Do you use Discord?
Discord?
Yes, sir.
I used to. I don't have it.
When's the last time you used it?
Like a few months ago.
Really?
Was it at Traditions or was it here?
No, it was at Traditions because in that Discord account that I had deleted it
before you moved here.
Yeah, because I think it got like it had been password pulled or something. Like I had clicked on a link and somebody.
Have you heard anybody on Discord when you were using it say something like that? Remember?
Like at that time?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think I ever had anybody that.
Never. And I mean, I'm not trying to get anybody hemmed up, but like this is some serious stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, he knows how serious it is. Trust me.
However, Discord told the investigators that it was them who closed down the account because the topics being discussed went against their terms of service. Colin told police that Colt knows the seriousness of weapons and what they can do and how to use them and not use them. And if that was him that made the threats, the guns would go away.
I mean, because I'm up there that much, you know?
Checking in on him.
Yeah, sure. I just want to make sure he's good.
Yeah.
So I'm a little taken back by the whole thing, but I can tell you this, I take that very serious, and so does he, as a matter of fact. You know,
Say his first name's Colt.
Colt, C-O-L-T, yes, sir.
I mean, all I can do is ask him.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
You know,
yeah, I want you to talk to him and just tell him. Like, I don't know anything about him saying any shit like that, and I'm gonna be mad as hell if he did. And then all the guns will go away, and they won't be accessible to him. You know, I'm trying to be honest with you. I'm trying to teach him about firearms and safety and how to do it all, and get him interested in the outdoors. Like on my phone,
and get him away from those video games.
Exactly right. That's the god honest truth. And the picture on my phone is him with blood on his cheeks from shooting his first deer. It was just the greatest day ever. So he knows the seriousness of weapons and what they can do and how to use them and not use them. So
10-4. No need.
It's kind of a little bit of a shock. So in whatever y'all are telling him, please instill in him that if this is whatever or wherever this is coming from, it's no joke. Like, it's no joke.
But we wouldn't be here if it was.
No, I know, and I'm telling you right now, we talk about it quite a bit. All the school shootings, things that happen.
The officers urged Colin to keep his firearms locked up and advised him to keep Colt out of school until the matter could be resolved. However, they ultimately couldn't determine whether or not the account actually belonged to Colt, and the case was later closed.
And then Colin made contact with him and then brought his son, got his date of birth, brought him out, spoke to him. Apparently he was getting bullied. Very soft-spoken, reserved kid.
Pretty much unable to substantiate anything at this point.
No.
And until we get more information from this so-called tip from the FBI, then
got Dad's phone number, so we'll just do an agency assist report for the FBI and write it up and we'll be done.
Sounds like a plan to me. Well, I appreciate you helping me out, man.
Hey, no worries. You take care, man.
Colt completed 7th grade, and in 8th grade, Colin made the now highly regrettable decision of purchasing his son his own AR-15 for Christmas. According to Colt's extended family members, Colt's mental health began declining during this time as well, and his maternal grandparents and aunt were becoming worried. When Marcy posted a picture of Colt's hunting, she captioned it, "Proud Mama." While the rest of the family was reportedly horrified about him having a gun, Colin, along with the 3 children, moved again to Winder in Barrow County, although he did so a few weeks late. Colt was enrolled at Apalachee High School to begin 9th grade. Almost immediately, Colt began skipping class and sometimes school altogether, which is a serious infraction outlined in the student handbook. It says that if a student is caught skipping one period, they will be sent home for the rest of the day. Colt's aunt Annie said there were discussions amongst the family about him having suicidal and homicidal thoughts and begging for months for mental health help. Annie spoke to her mom, Colt's grandmother, Debbie Polhamus, about her concerns as well. Debbie is a retired educator and administrator for Ben Hill County Schools, and texts between her and Annie indicate that a week before the shooting, Debbie went to the school for a meeting with Colt's guidance counselor. In a text with Annie, Debbie wrote, "He starts with a therapist tomorrow." The day before the shooting, Charlie Polhamus reports that Debbie visited the school again to discuss Colt's behavior and attendance issues. He said, "My wife had gone up there the day before and met with the teachers. They were having some problems with him not going to school and this kind of thing." Like I mentioned earlier, according to Marcy, the next morning Colt sent her that text message saying, "I'm sorry, Mom," and "You're not to blame for this," to Colin about 15 minutes later, prompting her to call the school. That's when the counselor informed her that a teacher said he was talking about school shootings earlier that morning. Why Colt hadn't been immediately pulled out of class at that moment is anyone's guess. But Marcy had this to say in an interview about what happened next.
Counselor said, "Well, I wanted to let you know that earlier this morning, one of Colt's teachers had sent me an email that said Colt had been making references to school shootings. Between my gut feelings, the text messages, and now this email, y'all need to go, run to the classroom."
After the shooting, a source with law enforcement told CNN that during the search of Colt's bedroom, documents believed to be written by him were found referencing past school shootings. These included the 2018 massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. These, as well as all of the other factors Colt was experiencing at home, may point to his motivations for carrying out the shooting, which is something people always search for after tragedies like this. Why did it happen? Who's to blame? Were there signs? And so on. In 2019, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security put out a research report titled Protecting America's Schools, the U.S. Secret Service Analysis of Targeted School Violence. This report found the most common motive among shooters involves a grievance with other classmates, and says that they usually use firearms acquired from within their own home. They normally have also experienced some type of psychological, behavioral, or developmental problems. The report shows that half of the attackers had an intense interest in violent topics, had experienced social stressors involving relationships with peers, such as isolation and bullying. Nearly every attacker experienced negative home factors and have had disciplinary problems in school or prior contact with law enforcement. In the report, they all communicated their intent to attack at some point prior to the incident. There's usually a history of these people being cruel or violent towards animals, and are often fascinated or obsessed with weapons. A forensic psychologist named Dr. Jeff Kalazewski just did a video after the Apalachee shooting and has experience from conducting risk assessments on over 100 teenagers who posed a threat of school shootings. He said that the first thing he sees in children at risk is a noticeable increase in social withdrawal or isolation. The second thing is that almost all of them attempt to desensitize themselves from gore and violence, and usually start out with the child consuming a lot of violent video games or horror movies. That progresses to more graphic imagery like real death footage and even medical-oriented videos like autopsies. The child typically does a lot of research on how to carry out a shooting by researching and becoming obsessed with other highly publicized cases. They often make a kill list of classmates or staff they want to harm, and some kids start to practice their technique by shooting guns more often. They'll typically find someone online who has similar grievances to fantasize with and will start to do physical reconnaissance of the school. He said in most cases, school shootings aren't a matter of the attacker snapping and making an impulsive decision. It's usually well thought out and planned, and very rarely comes out of left field for them or anyone else around them. There's always signs, and I think it's obvious Colt Gray was displaying most, if not all, of these characteristics. That being said, what can we do about it? With studies like this, research, and doctors telling us what to look for, why does it keep happening? Even though Colt seems to have checked a majority of the boxes of a high-risk student, there are some key differences between this situation and other school shootings. For starters, Colt was brand new at Apalachee and wasn't even there long enough to be bullied by any of the students there. He may have been bullied in the past, but Sheriff Smith pointed out that Colt didn't give Apalachee a chance to love on him. He didn't give the students a chance to be his friend or for any services they had to benefit him. It was as though he was taking all of his grievances and issues from his past schools and home situation out on innocent people at his brand new school, like he saw an opportunity and decided to take it.
And I want it to be very clear too that he had registered 2 weeks prior to that and only been to school maybe 3 days. This was his second or third day. Colt Gray didn't give that school a chance to love on him. I'll be honest with you. He did not give Chi Nation, and that's what we call them, Chi Nation, an opportunity to love on him. Had he done that, I feel confident we wouldn't be talking right now. Confident. Because every child that comes into Barrow County schools from pre-K on, they are loved and they are told they're worthy, and every one of them. And we have our problem kids like every other system, but they're given that love, and I don't think he gave that opportunity. I think he was there and said, "This is my opportunity," and here we are.
Gavin DeBecker is a prominent American author and security specialist known for his work in the field of personal security and threat assessment. He's been referred to as the nation's best-known expert on predicting violence and was twice appointed to the Presidential Advisory Board for Homeland Security. In a video regarding school shootings, Gavin had this to say.
One concern we all have as our kids go to school are the kinds of things we see on the news, multiple victim shootings in schools, kids coming to school with guns, etc. And what I encourage people to do is to recognize that the majority of these cases that we've seen are nearly identical. They are not different. They're presented by the news media as if it's a whole new thing, and look what's happened. But there have been so many of them, and they all have the same common ingredients. You have a child who is alienated from other kids, usually alienated from parents. You have kids who have talked about suicide or threatened suicide, and you have many people who are aware ahead of time that something isn't right. And yet many people are reluctant to say anything because you fear it would stigmatize the child or what have you. People are also reluctant to go in and talk to the principal. Something I've noticed with some irony is that as adults, we still treat the principal as if he's some big authority figure. Well, at 58 years old, I'll tell you, he's not my authority figure. This is a civil servant, God bless him or her, who has a job to do, and I'm not the least bit intimidated to go into the principal's office and say what I feel is important and express and ask questions that I think are important to get the answers to. And if all of us would communicate more, parents with each other and parents with the school, you would identify earlier kids who need help. Ironically, one of the things we hear about these kids is that all the signs were ignored. Well, being ignored is actually one of the pre-incident indicators that is present in multiple victim shootings, meaning the person felt ignored. And so getting help to people, it's not a matter of getting them in trouble by saying I have a bad feeling about that student. It's a matter of getting them helping resources. Nobody is harmed as a result of you being concerned that a particular child in school might act out violently. He is helped in most circumstances, and so is everybody else. And it comes to the same thing, which is being willing to speak up, being willing to express what you feel without feeling that you have to prove it.
So again, he discusses potential school shooters as being alienated, having suicidal or homicidal thoughts, all of which Colt was allegedly experiencing. He also mentions that these signs are typically ignored and that these people usually don't report for fear of stigmatization. However, this is where the Apalachee situation seems to differ, because it appears as though Colt's extended family at least wasn't ignoring his cries for help, and that the school was made aware and trying to get him resources. So when noticing the signs, reporting, and seeking services all fail, what else can be done to prevent these tragedies? If what is being said is true, yes, it's obvious Colt had experienced hard times, but his needs weren't just being completely neglected. Something else has to give when the typical safeguards aren't enough. Even though Marcy's family has denounced Colt's dad, Colin, many people are pointing out the fact that it did appear as though he was at least trying to connect with his son. He obviously went about it in a horribly misguided way, but when a kid is stuck inside constantly playing video games, fathers will often try to bond by bringing their sons outdoors. These activities can include hunting, which is clearly something Colin was really passionate about and hoped his son would be too. For a typical child who doesn't have any mental health problems, the patience, practice, and precision involved in hunting could theoretically be a positive experience. However, psychologists have suggested that taking an already disturbed child and pressuring them to kill an animal can change something about them, especially around that pivotal preteen age. People have noted that in the video of Colin and Colt hunting, Colt seemed a little uncomfortable. He possibly felt pressure to make his dad proud by killing an animal that he wouldn't have otherwise done so. Hunting isn't a bad thing in general, but it's not hard to see the connections between a disturbed kid killing an animal going on to feel more comfortable with killing people. Colin was also under the ignorant impression that purchasing his son his own firearm would somehow make him more interested in their shared passion for hunting. We saw something similar in the Oxford school shooting in 2021 carried out by 15-year-old student Ethan Crumbley. In fact, many people are pointing out the striking similarities between these two cases, especially because they are the only school shootings where the parent of the attacker have been charged. Ethan Crumbley displayed similar warning signs as Colt, some even more extreme. These included filming himself torturing animals, being obsessed with firearms, and Nazi propaganda. He also told his mother he was experiencing hallucinations, but due to problems within his parents Jennifer and James Crumbley's marriage, many of their son's issues were ignored. They also decided to help Ethan find something to be passionate about, and similarly, purchased him a gun for Christmas. They took him shooting at a local gun range, but failed to properly store the gun, even though it was clear that Ethan was disturbed. This led to him shooting up his school, killing 4 students and injuring 7 others. In an unprecedented turn of events, Jennifer and James were charged and convicted on 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to a minimum of 10 years in prison. The Crumbleys being charged was a controversial decision in itself, and critics saying that individual accountability lies with the person who committed the crime rather than the parents. They argued that holding parents liable could set a dangerous precedent and infringe on Second Amendment rights. It's also been said that the choice to hold them accountable was more of a political statement, setting an example for other parents to be more responsible with their firearms and to get their children suffering from mental health issues immediate help. However, if the intention was to open the eyes of parents in similar situations, it didn't do so effectively for Colin Gray. I don't want to get into politics too much about banning assault rifles and things like that, but if you want to discuss your opinions, the comments are a good place to have a civil conversation. I will mention that after tragedies like this, politicians always come out either for or against having stricter gun laws in our country.
Now look, the Kamala Harris answer to this is to take law-abiding American citizens' guns away from them. That is what Kamala Harris wants to do. But we have to ask ourselves, we actually have been able to run an experiment on this because you've got some states with very strict gun laws, and you've got some states that don't have strict gun laws at all, and the states with strict gun laws, they have a lot of school shootings. And the states without strict gun laws, some of them have school shootings too. So clearly strict gun laws is not the thing that is going to solve this problem. What is going to solve this problem, and I really do believe this, is look, I don't like this. I don't like to admit this. I don't like that this is a fact of life. But if you are a psycho and you want to make headlines, you realize that our schools are soft targets. And we have got to bolster security at our schools so that a person who walks through the front door We've got to bolster security so that if a psycho wants to walk through the front door and kill a bunch of children, they're not able to. And again, as a parent, do I want my kids' school to have additional security? No, of course I don't. I don't want my kids to go to school in a place where they feel like you've got to have additional security, but that is increasingly the reality that we live in. And a bunch of my colleagues in the Senate, we actually worked on legislation that would give schools more resources to bolster their security, because if these psychos are going to have to go after our kids, we've got to be prepared for it. We don't have to like the reality that we live in, but it is the reality that we live in, and we got to deal with it.
But at the end of the day, children can't purchase their own guns anyway. It will always be the parent's responsibility to properly store firearms in their home, and possibly even remove them if they have a mentally ill or disturbed kid.
And people are curious, how is that possible to charge him with a murder charge?
I'm all for the Second Amendment. I have no problem with you if you're a legal, law-abiding citizen that you want to purchase a firearm. I have no issue with that. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the entire Constitution, front to back. It's not up to debate for me, politics, but if you're going to own a firearm and you were going to have possession of a firearm, I believe you should be responsible for the whereabouts of that firearm, how you store it, where it's around. You should. And I think Colt Gray did not have responsibility, and I think his actions of leaving that firearm available to Colt Gray is why we're here today. And so he's getting charged with second-degree murder, not only for that, but the cruelty to children, and that's part of it. But I'm adamant, and I know we're in uncharted waters in a lot of things, but I applaud our DA. I applaud Brad Smith for seeing this for what it is, and taking that step to prosecute someone, and again, not trying to send a message, at all, but trying to send a sense of responsibility to gun owners.
In 2022 alone, over 250 school shooting incidents were reported in the United States, and that number has only continued to grow. It's a common phenomenon for there to be copycats and a spike in threats after these events, and the days after the Apalachee shooting were no different. The GBI provided a list of these on their website, including a 15-year-old in Jackson County being arrested for threatening to finish the job at Apalachee and then shoot up another school. A 14-year-old in Gainesville was arrested for making terroristic threats on social media, as well as a 13-year-old student in Brooks County. 2 students were also arrested for bringing guns to school. The first was at McIntyre Park Middle in Thomasville, and the second was at Woodland Middle in Henry County. The GBI also stated that this wasn't a complete list, which just goes to show how serious of an issue this is. These shootings, threats, and near misses have sparked countless online debates of how to keep our schools safe going forward, but it's not an easy answer. One of the obvious remedies often discussed is the need for schools and the student body to create a culture of inclusion, with readily available resources for students struggling with mental health issues. While that's helpful in theory, we've seen in this situation that even though Apalachee is reportedly a really positive environment for students and has many resources, they may not have benefited Colt. He was already coming in with all of his past baggage and trauma and decided to carry out his act without giving the school or his new peers an opportunity to help. So then what? There's situations like this, and even ones where non-students enter schools and commit shootings. School services and fostering relationships aren't going to do anything to stop those scenarios, and many people have pointed out that even though most schools have an armed resource officer, they're often outgunned by the intruder or can't get to them in time to stop the carnage from taking place. We saw this in the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, where a former student named Nicholas Cruz shot and killed 17 people. There was also the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where 18-year-old former student Salvador Ramos fatally shot 19 students and 2 teachers. That case is most recognized for law enforcement's despicable failure. They arrived at the scene almost immediately after the shooting started, but waited over an hour to engage the shooter. In stark contrast, the heroism of school resource officers Chase Boyd, Brandon King, and 3 other resource officers named Dawson Matherly, Matt Cook, and Tanner Good saved countless lives due to their bravery and neutralizing the threat as soon as possible. However, even with these officers in the school, lives were still lost, and many people say that the only way to stop these shootings from taking place is to stop guns from entering the building to begin with. Thousands of people have signed a petition for this month calling for the mandatory implementation of metal detectors in all Georgia schools. There's similar calls for action across the country, and it all seems like a relatively easy no-brainer decision. However, critics opposing the idea say that having students pass through a metal detector in the morning is time-consuming and can create a crowd at the door, delaying instructional time. They also cite the false sense of security metal detectors can give, and cause students to feel like they're entering a jail rather than a safe school. Cost is another component regarding the metal detectors themselves, the installation, and properly trained staff who would then be responsible for searching and seizing any weapons found. While those are fair arguments, people in favor of metal detectors say that the cost of a person bringing in a weapon is much higher. Even though metal detectors aren't foolproof, presence of them can also act as a deterrent to anyone who may have any ideas of bringing a weapon into the school. The security system utilized at Apalachee High has also been praised for saving lives during the shooting. The panic buttons were able to immediately alert law enforcement, show them where in the building the event was taking place, and put the school on an immediate hard lockdown. More than 60% of schools in Georgia now have a contract with the Synergic system, which costs each school around $8,000 per year. Many people have pointed out that if schools can afford this system every year, they can also afford to have metal detectors as well, or even instead. While the system can be used for other things like medical emergencies, fires, and so on, an active shooter situation is less likely to arise if, again, a weapon never enters the building. Standard metal detectors cost anywhere between $2,000 to $5,000. Schools could have one at the front entrance and one at the bus lane where a school resource officer or administrator could facilitate. This would also require students arriving at school late or non-students visiting to pass through it before gaining entrance to the rest of the building. Many schools have already implemented a buzz-in policy where people have to be manually let in the front door and then pass through the office to show an ID. Adding a metal detector would only be one more step in that established process. Even though it would potentially be a little more time-consuming, at this point that's a very small thing to consider when lives are at stake. Critics also say that on an everyday basis, students have items on them that contain metal, such as rings in their binders, car keys, scissors, band instruments, and so on. But nowadays there are metal detectors that can actually differentiate between these items and weapons using AI software to pinpoint common shapes of items like knives and guns. There will always be pros and cons for every solution, but we're at a point now where something just has to be done. Will it be costly? Yes. Will it be time consuming? Yes, but many people argue that time and money shouldn't be a factor when it comes to the lives of our children. Every single year and after every single school shooting, we hear the same conversations. How many times are the people in power going to say, "This has to stop," before they actually do something to stop it? Analyzing Colt Gray's life was in no way to try to excuse what he did, and there's honestly no explanation that can make his choices more palpable either. However, it does help to understand how we got here, and hopefully act as a serious wake-up call to parents. In an open letter, Marcy Gray wrote, "To the parents and families of those affected by the tragic events at Apalachee High School, I want to say that I am so sorry from the bottom of my heart. If I could take the place of Mason and Christian, I would without a second thought. My heart breaks for the two teachers who gave their lives while in the service of teaching and protecting our children. We are all living a nightmare right now, and I will personally never forgive myself for what has happened. My son Colt is not a monster. He is my oldest baby. He is quiet, thoughtful, caring, funny, and extremely intelligent. Please pray for him and the rest of our family, as I am praying for all of you every moment of every day." Colt's entire family has to be going through a wide range of emotions, and even though Colin is the only parent charged, many people are pointing towards Marcy as well for shaping Colt into the person he became. Even though Marcy called the school that morning, the chaotic, traumatic, and unstable household she helped create for her children undoubtedly had an effect on Colt's mentality. Children see everything. They're affected by their parents' actions, behavior, and choices, whether we want to admit it or not. Hopefully, parents dealing with domestic violence, addiction, or not fostering a sense of stability for their kids can see this as a sign that they need to change before it's too late. Not only can their children turn out like Colt Gray, who will more than likely spend the rest of his life in prison, but they can be held legally responsible as well. The Apalachee High School shooting was another senseless tragedy that took the lives of innocent victims while traumatizing thousands more. It goes without saying that this needs to stop, but it's also time we quit talking and start doing something about it. We have the resources and technology. It's just a matter of the people in power putting children's lives ahead of everything else. Teachers should be able to teach without worrying about having to lay down their lives to defend their students, and students should be able to go to school to learn, but they can't do that if they're afraid of being shot. I want to take a second to recognize School Resource Officer Chase Boyd Brandon King, Dawson Matherly, Matt Cook, Tanner Good, the Barrow County Sheriff's Office, the GBI, and all of the first responders who were at the scene that day. Most importantly, I want to commemorate those who were injured and the ones who tragically lost their lives. We don't know all of the names of the teachers and students who sustained injuries, but they are thankfully expected to make a full recovery. Richard Aspinwall and Christina Arimi were killed while simply trying to just do their jobs. Richard was a loving husband, devoted girl dad, cherished son, and beloved coach and teacher. Christina was a treasured wife, daughter, sister, aunt, friend, and colleague, and was passionate about her Romanian heritage and teaching. The two students whose lives were stolen were 14-year-olds Mason Shermerman and Christian Angulo. Mason was known for his infectious smile, constant laughter, loving video games, and being full of life. Christian was known as a free spirit who loved to make everyone laugh. He was sweet, caring, and loved by everyone who knew him. The entire Behind the Headlines team wants to extend our sincere condolences to the families and friends of the victims in this case, as well as our prayers for the students and staff who have been changed by this horrific experience. We are all parents, and I can't begin to imagine the heartache you're experiencing and anxiety you have about going back to school. I hope that the community can come together to comfort one another and get back to some sense of normalcy, because you shouldn't have to live in fear. Colt Gray is currently being held at the Barrow County Detention Center. His new attorney named Jimmy Berry just put in a request for him to be separated from the other inmates, claiming that he's receiving death threats. Jimmy Berry is a prominent defense attorney out of Cobb County and about an hour and a half away from Barrow, and has worked on other high-profile murder cases in the past. It would be interesting to know his reasoning for taking on Colt as a client. Regardless, as of now, Colt is being represented by a public defender and is being held at the Regional Youth Detention Center in Dalton. Both are set to have their preliminary hearings on December 4th. Please let me know your thoughts about Colt Gray being charged, as well as everything else we've covered in this case. I'll be keeping a close eye to bring you any more updates. This has been Joshua John with Behind the Headlines, and until next time, stay safe.
Thank you.